Hi, my name is John, and this is Business Update. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about the serious issue that's been occurring in the aviation industry. In particular, the airlines who had to find ways to replace those pilots that they have let go during the pandemic. And as I mentioned in the past, that in previous videos, that there is a severe repercussion in doing so, because obviously during a pandemic you have to uh, stave off any difficulty, in this case the pandemic, on the shutdown of your operation. But that doesn't mean you have to let go of your key employees, in particular in the aviation, in the airline industry, that you rely on pilots to ferry passengers to and from particular different locations around the world. And without the pilot, your planes, no matter how full they are with passengers, is going nowhere. And in this case, they tried to rectify it by hiring or getting newbies, in this case younger recruits, to replace the pilots shortage that was mentioned, which is a big opportunity for up and coming pilots, as mentioned. And to the point now, as of today, they're making a proposal to have the flight time requirement for pilots due to the shortage, as mentioned. And obviously, in terms of piloting, obviously, having a ton of experience or flight simulations on how to fly different types of plane that you're supposed to fly in the first place is very important. Experience always trumps any technical training or aspects or any knowledge that you know of a particular aircraft and so forth. Now, FAA deemed it, the proposal is ludicrous, which they rejected, which made sense because obviously inexperienced pilots can, I would say all the time, but would increase the likelihood of making a mistake here. And if a pilot makes a mistake, that could be catastrophic and could bring down the airplane and, cause a lot of deaths unnecessarily here. And in this particular article, according to CNBC.com, so the FAA, as mentioned, or the Federal Aviation Administration, rejects the proposal to have the flight time requirements for pilots due to a shortage prompts route cuts. And obviously, with the limitations of shortage of pilots, they had to either cancel flights or remove certain routes because they cannot able to meet the demand because of obviously with the rise in travel after the pandemic, the normalcy that you would consider has risen this year in more particular, and more so in the coming years to follow here. It was mentioned here that the Republic Airways proposed to regulators way back in April that pilots be allowed to fly commercial passengers after 750 hours of flight time. Now, one would think that 750 hours is a lot of time, but still, uh, actually learning, similar to how driving a car here, even though you've been driving for several years, you wouldn't say that you are a somewhat of an expert in knowing all of the instances, all of the scenarios that you may encounter, because all it's always that every day you might encounter something new, new obstacles, new difficulties that you may encounter that you haven't learned in the past, decade or so. So having 750 hours of experience seems good initially, but obviously more hours, double that, triple or quadruple that flight time is always a benefit here. And obviously that's why typically pilots has to spend a lot, invest a lot of time training to become, a senior pilot and reach the top ranks here. And short circumventing the process will have a severe repercussion and consequence here. And obviously the worst case scenario that one would want to avoid is, plane crashes here because of improperly or not trained or not qualified pilots is the main issue here. And obviously the severe shortfall of pilots is continuing be a big issue here. And I think they made the wrong choice of letting those pilots go in the first place just to save on cost. And now they're now having to catch up, and it's not as if it's easy to replace those pilots anyhow. And by then, either they've shifted their careers or maybe changed different companies, airlines, and by then it's already too late. Those who had hold on to those pilots in the first place obviously have benefited from them tremendously here. So let's take a closer look here. So Republic Airways, which flies short routes for Delta, American, and United Airlines, proposed regulators to allow for pilots to be allowed to join the airline after 750 hours of flight time here. So normally, you have to have at least 1,500 hours or 1,500 hours of flight time required to fly uh, uh, required before a new pilot can fly commercially. And obviously, that's pretty significant, so that you gain that substantial experience being a co-pilot where you have a senior pilot at the helm, so you learn or you learn from your master or mentor, so to speak, so that you learn the different nuances, the different subtleties of flying an aircraft, because you deal with the elements, whether it's strong winds, strong rains, or different terrains and whatnots. And it takes a lot of years, hours of experience to be able to fly a large aircraft with some certain confidence here. And reducing cost in the early stage of the pandemic will never be a surefire way to salvage or recover much quicker in the long run here. Anyway, it mentions here that the 15-hour rule was passed after the fatal Colgan air crash way back in 2009 in Buffalo, New York. So the crash also led to new requirements for a minimum period of rest for pilots before a flight. And again, there's a reason why extensive trainings, experience is required to avoid such crashes as mentioned here. And it's not just the training is mentioned required, but the rest in between your flights is important. So it's not enough that you just pilot a flight, let's say a few hours here, and then you have intermittent rest, so that you're well rested for your next flight, because you do not want a pilot to be tired on the seat piloting a expensive aircraft and with hundreds of people lives at your hands. And you could just imagine for land vehicle, whether it's a car or a bus or even a truck, that can cause a lot of damage if the driver behind the driving seat is tired and not attentive in their driving driving capabilities. And more so for the airplane, for the pilot, because if the pilot makes a mistake, the airplane will crash, which is the worst thing that could happen here. And avoiding it is always critical and very important here. So they even mentioned that the FAA considers it to be far greater public interest to ensure and maintain the level of safety provided by the foundation of an integrated aviation education required. So, meaning criteria that the agency said in its decision, which was released a day ahead of the regional airline conference in Washington, D.C. So, so the problem here is, how do you rectify this? Well, you have to bite the bullet here, wait for the pilots to reach that certain threshold before they are able to man those airplanes and generate the necessary revenue that they have lost because of that. And no amount of saying that they're disappointed but not surprised that our petition to the FAA was not met with the review. Well, obviously, the lives is more important than the business health of any airlines or any company at that. Because if many of those airlines were to suddenly, just hypothetically, if many of those airline pilots were to cause a lot of crashes, then that would be the fault of the governing agency, which is the FAA, as mentioned here. So rather than take that risk or burden, then it's the choice that the companies, the airlines made prior to letting go of those seasoned pilots. They didn't have to do that, but in order to save cost, rather than reduce the salaries of those executives so that they can hold on to those capable pilots, and now you're reaping the consequence, which is not good, right? And it will take some time before that normalcy will recover. And obviously the interesting part is, obviously, because of supply and demand, not just the limited supply of pilots, the airfare, as mentioned before, we've discussed this, will have an uptick in cost. So obviously, until that normalizes, which how long that takes, 6 months to a year or even years later, only time can tell here. And obviously they should have managed it much better in terms of crisis situation, like the pending. Obviously, no one expected it, but nonetheless, you have to make hard choices. They chose to salvage their big paycheck versus the long term strategy of what will happen in the near future here. Anyway, that's about it. So come back again on Wednesday for more business updates. So if you enjoyed watching these types of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button to help continue support and grow this channel. So we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So let's keep it pushing. Anyway, so that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.